This budget tracker literally saved my life and got me out of $40,000 in credit card debt, and now I have a plan to be a multi-millionaire by the time I retire. And it's super easy to use. We have a snapshot of everything right here, so I can see my current total, which is what I currently have in my balance and savings, the current balance and my current savings broken out separately, how much I spend each week and be able to compare that from my weekly target, how much I spend each month and compare that to my overall budget to see if I'm ahead or behind. I can see my 12-month projection right here for my balance plus savings, my balance and my savings to make sure I'm on track and nothing is negative. And then down here I can see my monthly discretionary spending, which is the same thing as up here, just for the entire month instead. How my monthly subscriptions are doing, so I can see exactly how much I'm spending on subscriptions, and I'm able to see any increases. And I can see how many monthly transactions per my credit cards. Unlike a lot of other people, I'm very for credit cards, even though they can be dangerous. As long as you have a plan, they're really not dangerous. You have a lot of protections built in, and you get those points. And that allows you to have a little bit better quality of life than you would otherwise. One big thing that's different between my budget tracker and the normal budget tracker that you see is that mine is based off of the week, not the month. And the reason I do this is because I built this when I was trying to pay off my credit cards. So I had no faith when I was paying an extra payment towards my credit card that it wouldn't cause me to be short throughout the month. So this allows me to see exactly how much I have every single week to know how much I can spend extra and when I need to hold off. And it's super easy to use. So for example, I decided I want to have $1,000 left over every single week just as a buffer. So I've saved up to $1,000. Then on top of that $1,000, if there's anything left over, I either put that towards an extra credit card payment or I transferred it to savings to add an extra buffer for my security fund. So for example, right here I have $3,943.26 left over for this week. Let's say I want to transfer $2,500 into my savings. All I have to do is type in negative $2,500. And that way I can anticipate transferring that much money to my savings account and see exactly how much I have left over after. If I wanted to do a credit card instead, all I have to do is go to the formula, and at the very end just put 2,500, and it will increase the amount based on that much. Go ahead and delete the savings. And it's the same exact thing, only difference is we have it based off of the credit card transaction instead. So now for credit card number 1, we have $2,700 that we're going to pay down on that card, which includes a $200 payment from the expenses that have already accrued, plus the extra $2,500. I track all of my expenses right here. So once a day or every couple days, depending on what's going on, I'll simply double click on the cell, put the date, I'll put the transaction type. So if it's a payment on a card, you can do this. Honestly, I don't usually do that route. I usually just do debit or credit. So debit is it's going out of your account. Credit is it's a refund going back into your account. Let's say I'm doing social and entertainment and I'm putting it on credit card 1. So now I can say I'm going to put $60 on that and it's at El Pinguino. And the location should be filled out for all of these, but it's an example, so I left it off just out of sheer laziness. Now that I logged that transaction, it's automatically deducting the $60 from my budget this week. So instead of having $75 that you see for these future weeks, now it's subtracted that $60, so now I have $15 left over that I can spend for the rest of the week. Now we deducted it from our budget, but now it's on the credit card, so it's not reflecting anywhere on this sheet on the credit card. So over here on the Bills tab, now all we have to do is update the remaining balance. So since I spent $60, if I go to my credit card, I'll be able to see that my new balance is $5,740. And you can see here that the amount due this month, which we manually update once it's confirmed, is the same, but our amount due next month is $60. And now you can see that right over here for credit card 1, it says $60 for the following month. So this is how you're able to anticipate what you spent currently and be able to pay it off later. The reason why this is important is that way you never have to worry about having enough money next month to pay your bills this month. You'll be able to see exactly how tight you're getting as you get there and make sure that you have plenty of space and reduce as needed. Now the bill tab is kind of the core functionality of all of this. So we have all of our weekly due dates. So this is all of our discretionary money essentially. So I can say groceries, discretionary, which could be whatever you want it to be. Social and entertainment, purchases, work lunch, whatever you want to do, you can put those there. These are all adaptive, so if you want to rename it something else, you're more than welcome to. And then it will multiply all of these by 4 since it's weekly, so you can see the total amount that you have budgeted for that month for these categories. All of the one-time bills that you have, it's listed right here as well. And then you have your due dates over here, but it's only going to show you for the monthly total that amount since it is not a weekly occurrence. And then we have one-time occurrences, which is not weekly, it's not monthly. It's something like travel, Christmas, birthdays, if you want to invest. Unless investing is recurring, then you're more than welcome to put that in that category. And different things like that. So that's how this works. And all of these is what populates right here for you to select on the dropdown. And what's cool about this is, let's say you want to go on a trip in March. We have a little bit of money saved up, so I can simply go to travel and then put the amount that I want. So let's say I want to spend $1,800 on this trip, and I can see exactly how much it is at that time. And I can see that right here. Instead of transferring $1,500, we need to not, because we need that money to have enough money in our checking account to cover the bills. Another thing we can do that's really cool is we can transfer money back. So we can say $2,000, and this will remind us to transfer $2,000 to this account to cover the bill. Or we can very quickly go into our bills category. So let's say instead of having $150 budgeted per week for discretionary spending, we want to drop that down to $125. Once I do that, it will automatically adjust the category for all of the weeks. And now I can see, instead of having $499 right here, we have $1,105. So you're able to tweak your budget to make sure you're reaching all your goals very seamlessly with this method. Over here to the right, we have all of our income sources. And if you have 1, 2, 6, doesn't matter if there's enough space for you. If there's not, you can always add more. But if you get paid every other week, you can put week 1, week 3. And then on our weekly budget, it will automatically pull which ones you want based off of the week that you put it in. We have our expenses minus our income here to see how much cash flow we have at the end of the week. And then just down here, we have our calculator for the credit cards. So we have all of our credit cards listed right here. We have our credit limits, the remaining balances, the close date, what amount is due this month, and then it automatically calculates the current open and the current close dates based off of the close date that we put here. And then it will calculate anything for next month that's already been spent. Now, credit cards are very tricky when it comes to the month rollover, because sometimes it takes 1 day to settle a transaction, sometimes it takes 2. So when it comes to calculating it, it gets a little bit dicey. I do have a calculator right here that will show how much money you have spent based off of your expense tracker since the last close date. That being said, there might be a little bit of a discrepancy if something was paid for before and it's listed before the credit card closed, but it didn't settle till after. Or vice versa if it's the new month. But it should get you in the general ballpark, and at worst, it should account for more money than what you actually do need to have. So this is not really that important for most of these credit card types unless you want to use it for that. Instead, we have our balance, we have our amount due. This is manually input each month once everything is confirmed and you get that statement. And then it's simply going to calculate how much it is. So if we have our balance as 5500, then we can see that we have $300 that are due next month because we're paying $200 this month. It's a $500 difference in balance, so it automatically calculates that our next month payment will be $300. Now, if you have an Amex Platinum, for example, there is no credit limit. So instead of that, we're simply putting how much we have this month based off of first statement, and then it's just calculating how much is going to be due next month based off of the transactions listed after the close date of the prior month. And then for Apple, for example, if you have a monthly payment and you have a credit card type thing, we have a monthly payment. So the monthly payment, say, is $25. But then if you use your credit card for daily purchases, you have to add that to there. So with this calculation, we have all the purchases that were on the Apple card, but we have also the monthly payment added to the top of that. So we have total of $70. And if you have a balance on your credit card, this is all assuming that you have all your credit cards paid off. If you have a balance on your credit card, you want to use this calculation. All you have to do is just copy and paste it up here. So that way, it's not going based off of the remaining balance. It's going based off of your transactions since the last close date, plus the amount that's listed to be due for the amount due. And the reason why that's important is because we don't want to only include the purchases that are done this month. We want to include the purchases that are done this month, but we also want to include the minimum payment at minimum, because otherwise we'll be adding more to our debt amount that we don't want to do and have to pay interest on it. So that's not cool. We want to make sure we're paying everything. So those are the 3 types of formula. So if your balance is 0 and you don't have any special type of cards, you can simply subtract the remaining balance from the credit amount and then add back in the amount that's due this month, and that will give you your amount due next month. And this is all done calculated with this formula right here. And if you need to get a little bit more fancy due to your card type, or if you have balances on your card, things like that, then you'll use this formula that's right here. Now on the monthly budget, we have the start date. So this is, you'll just simply put what date you want to start tracking right there, and it will populate these months based off of that start date. And then you'll put the budget for that month. So if your budget is $4,000, you'll put that there, and the budget can change each month. Then we'll calculate how much you actually spent that month and then show you the difference. And this difference right here is what's being reflected on this over/under monthly spending chart on the dashboard. Lastly, we have this worksheet. This is all simply calculations and things like that. That's going to be hidden once you first get the spreadsheet. This is what powers all the different dashboards. And then one thing I forgot to mention is we have the spend calendar. So you can double click on it and select the first of whatever month you want to do. And you can see how much you spent each day for different categories. So if it's only discretionary, so on the bills tab, you can expand this section and list whether each bill name is considered discretionary, a subscription, or discretionary and groceries. So for example, groceries is not discretionary because you have to have them, but it is considered discretionary and groceries. Discretionary is whatever you want, but you don't necessarily have to have. So you don't have to go out and have social entertainment, but it's nice to have. So you can list whatever you want here, and then for any subscriptions, you can list them there. And then on the spend calendar, you can look at only discretionary spending. You can look at only discretionary and groceries, and you can look at everything. So I can see exactly how much I spent each day and track how many days that you had no spend days very easily. So that's an overview of the weekly budget tracker. I know it looks a little bit complicated, but honestly, it's super easy to use once you get used to it. And really all you're doing at the end of the day is logging the transactions that you had and updating the amount of credit card usage that you had. And that's really it. And after that, it will automatically add and subtract everything that you need to do from each budget. And you're able to easily reach your goals because you know exactly where your money is going and what projection you have to get to where you want to go. All right, so let's build this tracker from scratch. So let's go to File, New, Spreadsheet, or open up a Google Sheet, however you want. Note that it has to be in Google Sheet for this to work. You cannot use Excel. If you try to use Excel, you won't have all the functionalities that you have in Google Sheets, and Google Sheets is just easier, so use it anyways. And best of all, if you have a partner or a spouse that you share finances with, you can simply share this Google Sheet with them, and you can both be on the same page, looking at it and or making changes at the same time. All right, so let's exit out of this table pop-up, and we're going to rename some of these sheets. I'm going to go ahead and rename all the different sheets. That way we can have them for later, but we'll start in specific areas. So we'll right click on the tab and click rename. Instead of sheet, we're going to put dashboard. And then we'll click this little plus button to add a new sheet. Right click on sheet 2 and rename this as projected weekly tracker. And the names of these don't really matter, so if you want to change the name, feel free to. We'll add sheet 3 and right click on it and change that to expense tracker. Add a new one, and we'll rename sheet 4 to bills. Add a new sheet, rename sheet 5 to monthly budget. We'll add a new tab. We'll rename sheet 6 as spend calendar. And finally, we need one that says worksheet. So in all, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And before we get started with anything else, let's go ahead and rename our spreadsheet. You can rename this whatever you want. I'm going to go ahead and put upgraded week budget tracker tutorial. All right, so the first one we're going to do is the bills tab. And before we go any further, the spice level of this spreadsheet, I would say is probably a 4 out of 5. There's a lot of very complex formulas in here, because money's complex. That being said, as long as you follow the instructions to a T, exactly as they are written, you'll be fine. You'll be able to have the spreadsheet and be good to go. If you don't feel comfortable doing that because you don't want to make a mistake and then your money, because this is all about money, is affected due to a calculation error or something like that, then I suggest just getting the template instead. Yes, it does cost a little bit of money, but it will give you more peace of mind knowing that it's input correctly. But like I said, as long as you follow the instructions, take a pause for the video for the calculations if you need to. Just make sure that everything is good to go. You should be fine because everything is going to be spelled out for you. All right, disclaimer done. we have the bills tab we're going to start with. And what we're going to mimic is this right here. So we have all of our bills in a table, and we'll expand that to see some hidden columns. We have our pay, we have a calculation and calculate the cash flow, and we have our credit cards. Now, customize this to your situation entirely. You don't need to necessarily have all the different weeklies, the due dates, bill names, all that kind of stuff. Just think about the kind of things that you want. If you don't have 6 income streams, that's perfectly fine. Most people don't. I don't. You can just have however many you have. Don't forget to include your partner, or if you have somebody that you're planning on merging finances with in a little bit. I recommend doing 1 or 2 income sources past what you currently have. That way, if somebody gets added in, or if you pick up a side hustle, or you have something that pops up, you have somewhere to put it instead of having to add things in later on and reconfiguring things. Credit cards, you can go ahead and put whatever credit card information you have in. Make sure you put debit and credit in here as well. And that one is for the payment type on the expense tracker, so that way we can have the option to do the drop down. Same thing with the dash right here. We need to make sure we have that. That way on the projected weekly budget tracker, we have that dash that brings in a 0. All right, those are the disclaimers. Now let's get started on our spreadsheet. So the first thing we're going to do is mimic the bills table. So we're going to go all the way through column G. So I'm going to go select A through G, format, convert to table, and you can make this whatever color you want. All you have to do is click on the caret and go to customize table colors. And you have pre-built options right here, but if you don't like those, no big deal. You can simply click on the header, click add a custom color, and you can adjust it that way. In this case, I'm going to leave this as green. Where it says table 1, let's go ahead and click into that, and we're going to name this as bills. And the reason why this is important is because this is what you're going to reflect later on when it comes to having name ranges in your calculations to prevent you from having to go from one place to another place all the time. So for example, if I type in equals bills, I can go ahead and select either the entire table or a specific column without actually having to go to that column itself. This will make more sense in a minute. All right, so column 1, we're going to double click into that and type due date. Column 2, double click and type bill name. Then we'll type amount due. In column D, we'll type monthly total amount. And what you put in all these columns doesn't really matter. Just make sure you remember what they are later on so you can tell them apart. In column E, we'll put subscription. Column E, we'll put discretionary. And then in column G, we'll put discretionary and groceries. All right, so it's kind of cut off here. Let's go ahead and select these headers. And we're going to change the text wrapping from being clipped to wrap. And now we have those, and we can go ahead and make it centered as well, just to make it a little bit nicer. If it bothers you to have this cut off, you can simply make those bigger. Now you're good to go. We're going to want to hide columns E through G because they're not really important to us. So we're going to select E through G, go to view more column actions, and put group E through G. And now we have this toggle where we can click on the minus and collapse them, or click on the plus to expand them. All right, so now we need to add some categories to our columns. So I'm going to click on the drop down for due date and click edit column type. Now instinctually you would think that would be a number or a date. Instead, we want this to be a text. And the reason why is because we'll have either the option to put in a number, or we can have weekly or one time. So we want to have a little bit of flexibility here. And if you set it to a number, for example, then if you try to put in weekly, it will flag it as an error. Bill name, this will also be a text. Amount due is going to be currency. So we're going to put number, currency. And by default, this is location based. So for example, right now I'm in the United States, so it's formatted as US dollars. But if you're in the UK, for example, you'll see that this is based off of pounds instead of dollars. If you want to follow along where it is one for one exactly looking the same, all you have to do is go to File, Settings. Then you can change the locale to whatever country you want. So if I wanted to go to the UK, for example, I can click Save and Reload. And now you can see that's in pounds instead. So if I go back to Settings and go to the United States, Save and Reload, and now we're back to dollars. So Little trick in case you are wanting to make sure everything is aligned properly. You're more than welcome to change it to the United States. You can always change it back. This is your spreadsheet. You can make it look however you want. Monthly total amount. Let's go ahead and change that to currency as well. Subscription, this is going to be a text. Discretionary, this is going to be a text. And discretionary and groceries, this is going to be a text. Now, these are simply going to be a yes or a no. If you want them to be a drop down, you're more than welcome to. That might actually be a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and put this as drop down. And I'm going to change it to yes or no. So now everything right here is yes or no, and it'll be super easy to put it. Now I'll do the same exact thing for these. So I'll put a drop down, yes or no. And if you want to add some color, you're more than welcome to. It's entirely up to you. This is your spreadsheet. And then finally, let's change the discretionary and groceries to a drop down. And we'll put yes or no. And I might as well, why not? And if you forget to add color in one, all you have to do is click into the drop down, click on this little edit button, and then you can add color after the fact. Perfect. So what this is going to do is it's going to act as a flow through into the expense tracker. And then based off of what is being said for the expense tracker, that's where the spend calendar is going to come into play. So if we go back to our example, it says no, 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 yes. So the purpose of the spend calendar is to be able to see quickly what days you spent money that you didn't have to spend and what days you splurged a little bit. So if you're only looking at discretionary, I can see exactly how much I spent on discretionary items. If I want to see discretionary and groceries, I can see that as well. And if I want to see everything, I can see exactly how much I spent each day, whether it was required, mandatory, or not. So on the expense tracker, if I expand the end of that, you'll see that it automatically looks up the information based off of the category, aka the bill name that's selected. So that's what we're setting up right now. All right, so let's go ahead and set up some bill names. At the top, I like to put the weekly. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day what you do, but it's entirely up to you. I'm going to go ahead and put weekly for 3. I'm going to put groceries. I'm going to put discretionary. And in my household, discretionary can mean purchases, it can mean Uber Eats, basically anything outside of groceries. But you're more than welcome to break these into as many categories as you want. My wife doesn't really want to get too granular with it and feel like we have to borrow from Peter to pay Paul. So that's why we've kind of bucketed up. But once again, this is your spreadsheet. The great thing about building it yourself is you can customize it to do whatever you want it to do. So if you want to have groceries, Uber Eats, Ubers, purchases, whatever those buckets are, you're more than welcome to do so. The biggest thing is whether it's a weekly occurrence or if it's a one-time expense based off of a due date, or if it's just a one-time expense randomly, so like a vacation, tax payment, whatever the case is. So I'm going to put groceries, discretionary, and work lunch. And then we have the amount due. So this is going to be the amount due per week, not month, per week. So let's say I want to do $100 per week for groceries, $150 for discretionary, and $50 for work lunch. We're good to go there. Now, for the monthly total amount, we'll add a calculation there later, but this will be based off of whether or not this is weekly or if it's not. So before we go any further, let's go ahead and put in the numbered date of the due date. So for example, on the 1st of the month, my rent is due, and let's say I'm paying $2,500 for rent. Let's say the 5th of the month, we have a student loan that's due. So we'll put student loan 1, and let's say that's $450. Let's say on the 12th, we have a streaming service that is due. So streaming service 1, that's $10. Now let's say on the 22nd, we have our electricity bill that's due. Now, on variable bills, it's still good to have the information in there. I would go ahead and use your average. Some months it's going to be a little bit higher. Some months it's going to be a little bit lower. For example, ours usually cost around $250 a month. I put $250 in a month there. If some month it's $198, then I will simply go into the projected weekly tracker and subtract the amount from the total. And oppositely, if it is on the higher side, let's say it's $320 for that month, then I'm going to go ahead and add it to the total inside the projected weekly and monthly tracker. And that's the way that I like to do it. That way you have a gauge, but it's not going to be 100% going forward. But it's entirely up to you. So if you want to go ahead and say, I want the maximum I've ever had, that way I can always subtract your budget, you do what you want. So let's say it's 250. And you'll probably have some more bills here, but I'm just doing a couple just for simplicity's sake. Now let's say that you have one-time expenses. So let's say one time, let's say travel, let's say tax bill, let's say celebration. So for example, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, birthdays, whatever the case is. And all of these will be one time. And then finally, right under here, we need that dash, so that way we have something to select. And let's say for travel, and since these are one time, these kind of have open-ended dollars. We're not going to put anything for the amount due, it's simply going to be empty. So now we want to calculate the monthly total amount. And here we're going to simply say if it's weekly, we want to multiply this amount due by 4. If it's not weekly, then we just want the amount due. So we're going to type equals if, and we need our logical expression. So the logical expression will be if the due date is equal to weekly, and weekly needs to be inside quotes because it is a text. Then we need to do the amount due times 4. If it's false, we simply want the amount due. So I'm going to press enter, and we can go ahead and autofill it. So now you can see here, we have 4 times the amount for the amount due if it's weekly. And if it's not weekly, we simply have the amount due. Now if we were to change something to weekly, you can see it automatically updated the formula to reflect the new data. So we're good to go. Now down here, we don't need that many rows. I'm going to go ahead and go to 36. I'm going to hold down Command Shift and press down to go ahead and select every single row that's there. If you're on a PC, it will be Control Shift and down instead. And then I'm going to right click on any of the rows and click Delete Rows 36 through 1000. So now we have that table. It's just a little bit more manageable. And realistically, we don't even need that many rows, but depending on how many bills you have, you may need them. All right, so for a subscription, let's go ahead and put no for every single one of these. Now I want to select all the cells, so I'm going to click and drag to select all 3. And then you'll see a little blue dot in the bottom right-hand corner. That's called a fill handle. Click on that and drag it all the way down through the end of the column. So now we have no for everything. And now we can simply mark yes for whatever we want. So groceries, yes to be included in the discretionary and grocery spending, not in discretionary, not in subscription. Discretionary, yes. Groceries is yes. And subscription, we want that to be no. Work lunch is discretionary, so we want that to be included in both the discretionary and the groceries, as well as the discretionary. We don't want any of these to be included because these are mandatory. We can't cut those if we lose our job or whatever else. Streaming service, we have a yes for our subscription, and these are all discretionary as well, so we'll go ahead and put that for everything. Electricity, no, and then everything else, no. If you want to include travel in your discretionary spending, you're more than welcome to, or celebration. It's entirely up to you. All right, so this portion of the bill tab is done. So I'm going to click on the minus button to collapse that row. I'm going to make H super small, click the entire thing, then go to fill color black, just to give it some separation. Now I'm going to select cells I1 through N8. And I'm going to click Format, Convert to Table. Now the reason why I'm converting to table and selecting them instead of clicking on Insert Tables is because Insert Tables likes to have the entire spreadsheet as a table, and it will clear out anything that's already there. But converting to a table allows you to convert multiple tables on the same tab. Now I don't want this to be the same color because that will just be confusing. So I'm going to click on the caret, go to Customize Table Colors. I'm going to click this purple color. And if you want to add a different color, feel free to. This is your spreadsheet. Now for the table, I'm going to put pay. And this is where all of our paychecks is going to be. And once again, you can name these tables whatever you want. Just remember what you put later on. All right, so in I1, we're going to put pay type, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and week 5. Now we're not going to use week 5 for most of our spreadsheet, but there are some months that have 5 weeks in there, so we need to make sure that we're accounting for it. Now, the different pay types are going to be the different paychecks that you get, so the different sources of income. And this is where I'm saying if you don't have that many, you don't need to put that many. It's entirely up to you. I'm going to put income 1, income 2, income 3. If you want to do 4, 5, 6, you're more than welcome to. If you want to leave it here, you can do that as well. Now, one tip is you can simply select 2 of them. It recognizes this pattern for 2 and 3. So you can use that fill handle to drag that down. And now you have income 4, 5, 6 without having to type it out. And let's go ahead and put total. Down here, we're going to put equals sum. And we're going to sum up these ranges. Now use the fill handle to drag this formula over. And this will adjust the range that it's looking up automatically, so you don't have to. Let's go ahead and change this column type to be a currency. Same thing with every single one of the column types. And the reason why is because we get paid in money. So we need to make sure that we're reflecting it accurately inside of our formatting. All right, and then for a pay type, let's go ahead and set that as text. And here you can put the paychecks. So if you get paid twice monthly at the beginning and the middle of the month, you'll put it in weeks 1 and weeks 3. So let's go ahead and put $2,000 if I make $2,000 a paycheck. And you're good to go there. Now let's say you get paid weekly. You can do $1,000 for every single week. Make sure you put $1,000 in week 5 as well, because when you have week 5, you want to make sure it reflects with that income. Now if you get bi-weekly, this one's going to be a little bit different. So what I recommend doing is just putting week 1 as your paycheck, assuming they're the same. If they're not the same, simply do week 1 and week 3, for example, or week 2, whatever you want to do. And then you'll just need to make sure that each week has the appropriate week number inside there, even if it's a little bit different than other paychecks. If you have a variable expense, I recommend putting the least amount that you would get paid. And then that way, if you get paid more, you can simply add that to the week. But that way you can make sure you have enough money budgeted just in case you get paid less. So I wouldn't recommend doing the average in case you get paid less that week. It's better to get paid more. All right, so now we're good to go there. Now I'm gonna go to K10 through M11. And let's go ahead and give this a outer border that's big. And now I'm going to just give it some color. So I'm gonna give this dark blue, let's make it white text, and we're good to go there. So here, and I'm gonna put total expenses, then total income, and cash flow. And if you don't know what cash flow is, that's just your income minus your expenses. So this will make sense in a second. So this is total monthly. So we're going to put equals sum, and we'll put the monthly total amount of the bills. So we have $4,410 in total amounts. If you want to leave these decimals, you can. I personally don't care about cents, so I'm going to adjust those. Now for income, we're going to put sum, and then select the first 4 weeks. We don't care about week 5 because week 5 doesn't exist in most months. So we're only going to do week 4. Now we're going to take the total income minus the total expenses. So after all of our expenses, we have a positive cash flow of $2,890 left over to do with whatever we want. Now, if this was opposite and we had, let's say we had discretionary income of $1,000 every week, now you can see we have a negative cash flow, meaning that we're spending more money than we're getting, and that's going to make us go into debt pretty quickly. If you want to set up an alert in case that ever happens, you can simply click on the cash flow cell, go to Format, Conditional Formatting, Format Cells if less than or equal to 0, and then put whatever you want. So I'm going to make it have a red background and a white text and hit Done. So now you can see it's negative. If we change this back to 150 and have cash flow positive, that will go away. So that way it's a red alert in case you have negative cash flow that pops up, so you know you need to adjust your discretionary spending to make sure you're always cash flow positive. And if you want to have a minimum cash flow, for example, if you want to have a minimum cash flow of $500 every month, You can always set that alert to be at $500 instead of 0. All right, so now if we go to I13 through P22, we're going to format this as a table. And I'm going to change this color to be a blue. You can change it to whatever you want it to be. I'm going to change this table name to credit cards. And in this credit cards table, we're going to list all the different credit card information and set it up where it automatically pulls the amount due for the current month for the next pay period, and then it automatically calculates anything that's already been paid on the card for the next month to make sure we have enough money to pay it off without having to do a lot of manual work. So for column 1, we're going to put credit card. Then for column 2, we're going to put credit limit. For column 3, we're going to put remaining balance. And you don't need to calculate your remaining balance. All you have to do is go on your credit card app and it will tell you how much you have left remaining for your balance. Column 4 would be the close date. And this is the day number of the close date. I don't know if I actually have any over here, so we want to add one. So let's go ahead and put 15, we'll put credit card 1. And we'll say 20 credit card 2. And we'll say we have a monthly payment of 40 for one and a 0 for the other. Perfect. All right, so we need here the close date. Now, if you look over here, this is actually listed under the due date, and this is because there's a gap between the due date of when your credit card payment is due and the closing date. Usually it's around 4 or 5 days, depending on how weekends are and things like that. But here we want this to be the close date. Reason being is if we have any credit card transactions for credit card 1 on the 16th, 17th, or 18th, it may or may not be in the current month close date or the next month close date. It all depends on when that settles. So for here, let's go ahead and put the 18th. We'll put the 23rd. You can check your credit card statement and see which dates they actually close. For column 5, we'll put amount due this month. We'll put current open. For column 7, we'll put amount due next month. And then for column 8, we'll put current close. Let's go ahead and make this where the wrapping is wrap, and we can go ahead and put it in the middle as well, just to make things nice and neat. And let's give it some types. So credit card, we want that to be a text. Credit limit, we want this to be a currency number. Remaining balance, we want that to be a currency number as well. Close date, we want this to be a text. The amount due, we want this to be a currency number. Current open, we want this to be a date. And we'll just put the date type under date. Amount due next month, we want that to be number currency. And current close, we want that to be date, date. Perfect. Now I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so it looks a little bit better for the amount that was cut off. And the same thing here so it looks a little bit better. Perfect, there we go. All right, so now under credit cards, we're going to list all the credit cards that we have. So we'll say credit card 1, credit card 2, credit card 3. Now, if you have a Amex Platinum or a Apple card or anything that has a monthly recurring payment, these are going to be a little bit different of a formula. So make sure to pay attention to that part when I get to it. Reason being is Amex Platinums do not have a credit limit. So we can't calculate based off of the remaining balance and the credit limit if there is no credit limit. Now, Apple cards, for example, they can have a monthly payment that's due for different plans that you're on, but you can also use it as a credit card. So what we want to do for the amount due next month is calculate how much has been put on the credit card portion, add back in how much you have that monthly payment for, and that will give you the amount due next month. That's also what you need to do if you have a balance currently on your credit card. So for example, if you're in credit card debt, you have a $10,000 balance, you have a $25 minimum payment that you need to do each month. We want to add that $25 minimum payment to the amount due next month on top of everything that we already paid for this month. So that way we pay for everything that we paid for this month, plus we don't go into further debt by forgetting to pay that minimum balance next month. Obviously, we want to make sure we're paying more than our minimum balance to pay off the debt quicker, but when it comes to the baseline setup, that's how it's approached. So I'm going to put Amex and I'm going to put Apple. And then once again, don't forget to put credit and debit. And even though we don't need this necessarily for this table, we need it because we want to make sure that we have that in the drop-down list for the expense tracker. All right, so under credit limit, you're going to put the credit limit that you currently have. So let's say that one card for credit card number one is $1,400 credit limit. Let's say you have a $10,000 credit limit for card two and a $5,000 credit limit for card three. Now I'm going to skip over the remaining balance for right now, and we need to make sure we add the close date for credit card three since it doesn't exist elsewhere, and we'll say that's on the 7th of the month. Now I'll go ahead and add this to our bill list, so credit card three, and we have a zero balance on there as well. All right, so the amount due this month is simply going to be what is notified to you from the bank. The reason why I'm doing it this way instead of doing a calculation is because, once again, if you have a transaction date that is close to the close date, it may or may not go based off of the date that it settles. So if you have it listed prior to the close date, but it actually settles after the close date, it won't show up in the calculation, so this is easier for everybody. So let's say that we have a $500 amount due this month for this one, we have a $300 for this one, and a $0 for this one. Remaining balance is going to simply be the difference between the two. So the remaining balance for this one would be $900 because that's 500 minus 1,400. This one would be 9,700. And then this one would be 5,000 because nothing is spent. Now it's important to know that you don't have to do the calculation for this. Simply log on to your bank app and it will tell you exactly what your remaining balance is somewhere on there. Once you find it once, you'll know where to go and you'll be good to go from there. So if I have 15 different expenses that I track on the expense tracker, I'm not going to calculate all those manually. I'm simply going to update the remaining balance with what I see on the application. Now the current open, this is going to be the first of many complex formulas that you may have not seen before. And that's perfectly okay. You don't need to know how these work. If you want to know how things work, I'm more than happy to make tutorials on each of the formulas. But just for the sake of time, I'm not going to explain how these formulas work. I'm simply going to provide the formula to you so that way you can do it yourself. All right, so for the current open, we're going to put equals if, open parentheses. Now for our logical expression, we're going to put a second parentheses, EO month, today, open parentheses, close parentheses, comma, -1, close parentheses, plus L14, which is the close date right here, plus 1, close the parentheses, it's greater than today, open parentheses, close parentheses, comma, open parentheses, EO month, open parentheses, today, open parentheses, close parentheses, comma, -2, close parentheses, plus L14, plus 1, close parentheses, comma, open parentheses, EO month, open parentheses, today, open parentheses, close parentheses, comma, -1, close parentheses, plus L14, plus 1, close parentheses, and press enter. And I don't need to accept the autofill. I'm simply going to apply these to the ones that are correlated. And I'll go ahead and give the Amex and the Apple some fake close dates and apply those to them as well. Perfect. All right, so this is complicated, as I'm sure you might know. So what this is doing is it's saying, I want to find the first of the month that I'm currently in, so based off of today, and I'm going to add L14 to it. So instead of the first of the month, it's the 19th of the month. And if that date is greater than today, so for example, today is the 26th of December, the 19th of December is not greater than the 26th of December, so it's not going to execute that. But if it is, then I'm going to take the first day of the month last month and add 18 to it instead. Otherwise, if it's not true, then I'm going to simply take the first of the month this month and add 18 days to it. So, for example, we have December 19th, because today is December 26th, so we're executing this false statement, which is just simply adding 18 to the first of the month that we have here. But let's say that we had 29. We can see since today is not December 29th yet, is taking the true statement, which is looking for the beginning of last month, and it's adding 29 days to it. So that way, if the month rolls over, you'll still be in the current open period correctly, and it won't accidentally be reflected as the current month. And once again, you don't need to know how that works necessarily. You can just trust that it's going to work. So let's change this back to 18, and we're good. Now for the amount due next month, there's two different formulas really that you need to pay attention to. And this will depend on what your situation is. So if you're completely out of credit card debt, you can simply go equals credit limit minus remaining balance minus amount due this month and press enter. And now it will be $0. But let's say the balance changed and I spent $200 more on that card. Now the remaining balance is $700. The amount due this month stays the same because that's a fixed number that we only change when the amount due is listed on our statement. And the amount due next month is $200. And this will be reflected on next month's payment, not this month's. Now let's say for credit card 2, we actually do have a balance that we have from previous months that we're carrying over to future months. We'll need to get to that in a few minutes because we have to set up the expense tracker first, but that will be a different formula. All right, and then for the current close, we'll type equals EO month. Click on N14, 0, close the parentheses, plus L14. And then once again, I don't need the autofill. I'm going to drag this down to ones that apply, and we're good to go. So if you did this correctly, you should see that it is a month cycle. So it's 1 day before the current open date for the month after. So we have December 19th, January 18th, December 24th, January 23rd, and so forth. And if you have the other formula, so for example, if the close date is on the 29th, we haven't reached that yet, you'll still see the current open as last month's close, and the current close date is the 29th. And then once we get to December 29th, that's when it will flip from last month to the current month. All right, so now our bill section is pretty much done. We just have to fill in that last part of the amount due once we build the expense table. So we're going to go to the expense tracker now. We're going to go A through J. We're going to click Format, Convert to Table. You can change this to whatever color you want. I'll leave this one as green. And I'll rename Table 1 as Expenses. Now, just for the sake of time, since we went over this last time, you know how to do it now. We're going to update the columns to be transaction date for column A, then type, category, payment type, amount, location, notes, subscription, discretionary, and groceries. We'll click on HIJ, select all of the column, right-click, view more column actions, group columns H through J to create that little expand or collapse button again. And now we need to assign different types. So for transaction date, we're going to add date and date. And that will allow us to select from a pop-out calendar instead of typing it manually. For type, we're going to go to drop-down. Then we'll use criteria, drop. Then we'll click the 4 little boxes, click into select a data range, and go to our bill tab. Then we're going to select credit cards through the end of the column. And you'll see right here it says credit cards through credit cards. It changed the name to be the entire column of the table, so everything's working properly. Now if you want to change the colors, you're more than welcome to. So I'm just going to apply some random colors here, then hit done. Now I can simply select what I want from this table. If you add anything later on, so for example, I can put, if I got a new card, it will automatically update with that new drop-down option. You'll simply need to change the color. All right, for category, we're going to do essentially the same thing, just this time we're going to select the bill names instead. So we'll go to column type, drop down from a range, click the 4 little boxes, go to our bills tab, and then we're going to select all of our bills all the way through the end of the column. Hit OK. You can add colors if you want. I usually group different things together. So for example, if I have multiple credit cards, I will give them all the same color. But you can do whatever you want. Rent, utilities, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to go ahead and stop just for the time being. As you can see here, we have all of our different categories. Just like last time, if we add a new bill later on, or if we delete one, it will automatically adjust accordingly. Payment type, we want that to be a drop down as well. So we'll click drop down from a range, This will also be that credit card portion because we need to know how we paid for it. And I recommend putting the same coloration scheme, the same color scheme on both of these. That way it's just easier to pinpoint. You get used to what color each thing is. Amount we'll put as currency. Location we're going to put as text. Note we'll put as text. Subscription we'll put as text. Discretionary we'll put as text. And discretionary and groceries we'll put as text. So now everything is good to go for the most part on this tab. What we need to do now though is we need to add in where it automatically pulls from the bill table whether or not that specific category is a subscription, discretionary, or discretionary and groceries. Now, I don't want to have a new formula for every single one of these. Instead, I want to have one formula to do everything. So in row 2, I'm going to add a array formula. And all this is going to do is be a XLOOKUP formula for the bill. So this will make sense in a second. So we're going to do XLOOKUP, select the category, put a comma, then the lookup range is going to be the bill name. And this is based off of that bills tab, bill name. So that's our lookup range. We want to return whatever is that's listed here. So this time we want the subscription. So we'll put subscription. And then if there is nothing listed, we want it to be blank. Otherwise it will show it in A instead. So for example, if we didn't have that, press enter, it will show this in A because there's nothing that's found that's blank. But if I have this comma, then the missing value is going to return a blank cell. So that way it's nice and neat. I'm going to click between the equals in the XLOOKUP and wrap it in an array formula. Now you can type in array formula or you can simply use hotkeys. So on a Mac, you put Command Shift Return and that wraps it automatically with the array formula. And if you're on a PC, it will be Control Shift Enter. Hold them down at the same time. Now we want to extend the search key, so instead of C2, we want this to be C2:C, and press enter. So now, if I type in groceries, it will automatically populate that groceries is not a subscription. If I say streaming service 1, it is a subscription. That's because that's what we have on the bill. All right, now I'm going to anchor in our search key, and you can do F4 or put $signs before everything. And I'm going to drag this formula over to the other 2 columns. Instead of subscription, this will be discretionary. And then instead of subscription here, we'll have the discretionary and groceries. Perfect. So now whenever I select a category, it will automatically populate every single thing that is correlated with them for those three categories. Now, just like last time, we don't actually need to see these at all times. That's more of a flow through. So we're going to minimize that. And in the same manner, we don't want these to be overwritten on accident. So we're simply going to click on row 2, view more column actions, group row. And now we can hide that. So now all of our expenses will start on row 3. And it will still work the same way. It just won't show that first row. All right, so now everything's collapsed and nice and tidy. So I'm gonna go back to my bills tab. And this is if you have a rolling balance from month to month that you're still working to pay off. If you already paid it off, the other way is way simpler and way more accurate. But this way will give you a nice estimation to make sure you have enough money to pay things later on. So after whichever credit card you're wanting to use this for, we'll type equals sum ifs, open parentheses. And now we're going to type amount. And you'll see a couple of amounts that populate. We want the expense amount, comma, transaction date from the expense tab, comma, is greater than or equal to inside of quotes, an ampersand, whatever date this is, -1. And the reason why I have -1 is because I want to go based off of the close date, not based off of the new open date. So that way we have a little bit more transactions that are included. Then we're going to put transaction date after a comma, then a comma inside quotes, less than or equals to ampersand, the close date on the other side, minus 1, comma, payment type, comma, then select the card. Now we have the amount due next month. And this is going to be based off of the expenses listed. So for example, we can see that our current open is December 24th. If I go to my expense tracker and I log something for today, for example, let's go ahead and put debit. We'll put groceries, credit card number 2 for $20. Now, if you did it correctly, if you go to bills, you should see $20 now listed there, and that's because we have that listed. Now, if you go this route, you don't have to do anything with the remaining balance. You could delete it. It doesn't matter at all. But remember, we don't want to just pay off what we paid last month. We also need to factor in the monthly balance that you're paying. So we need to look up what's here. So I just added $40 to the amount due for credit card 2. So now we need to add XLOOKUP, like the search key, which is credit card 2, comma, bill name, comma. So that will be our lookup range. Then for the result range, we want this to be the total monthly amount, not just the amount due. So we'll put total monthly amount. We'll put a comma, so that way it's blank if nothing exists, and then we'll close it out. So now we have the $40 that we have to pay for the minimum balance, but we also have the $20 that we spent automatically included in this calculation. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in both of these, and we are good to go. So now our bill section is complete. I recommend taking a short break. That way you can clear your head before we move into the next stuff, because we have a lot more to do. All right, so now we're done with the bills tab and the expense tracker tabs. So now we're going to do the monthly budget tab. So what I'm going to do is select all of columns A through D, then go to Format, Convert to Table. And what we're doing here is we are creating this little table right here that shows the month, the budget, the actual, the difference, and be able to select what day you start with. So we're going to rename table 1 as monthly. And then before we go down any farther, let's go ahead and click on row 1, right click, insert one row above. So I'm going to select B1 through D1, go to the fill color. I'm going to use the dropper to select the same color as we have here. And if you want to leave the same color, you're more than welcome to. If you want to change the color, feel free to do that as well. I'll put start date. Now I'll make that a white color background. Then in cell D1, I'm going to make that a pop-out calendar. So we're going to click on D1, go to Data, Data Validation, Add Rule. Use the criteria drop-down to select Is Valid Date. Reject the input if it's invalid, and hit Done. So since it's a valid date, we can now use that pop-out calendar by simply double-clicking. In A2, for the column header, we're going to put month. Column 2 will put budget. Column 3 will put actual. And in column 4, we'll put difference. And up here for the start date, we're going to put whatever start date you're wanting to do. If you have a date that's not the first, it will still work because we're using that end of month formula, so it will calculate based off of whatever month you put in here. Just know that if you do December, for example, and you're at the end of December, then you won't have all the transactions from the previous month unless you go back and retroactively add them. All right, I don't want to have to add the months manually. I want them to be all based off of this start date. So in cell A3, we'll type equals if, open parentheses, is blank, open parentheses, D1, close parentheses, and D1 is that start date right there. We'll put a comma, comma, so that way it's blank if D1 is blank. Otherwise, we're going to put EO month, open parentheses, D1, comma, -1, close parentheses, +1, and we'll close the parentheses. So what this is doing is it's taking the last day of the month prior to this. So in this case, it is December 31st, and then it's adding one day to it, which is how we get January 1st. Now we're going to do something similar for this formula right here. So we're going to put equals if, open parentheses, is blank, open parentheses. We'll select B3, and the reason why we're doing B3 instead of A3 is because we only want this to show if a prior budget is filled out. We'll close the parentheses, put 2 commas, so that way it's blank if it's not filled out. And if it is filled out, then we are going to put EO month, open parentheses, A3, comma, 0, close parentheses, +1, close parentheses. So, as you can see right here, it's blank, but if we were to put a budget here, it will automatically populate. So everything's good to go there. Now everything is dynamic, so we can simply drag this formula down to the rest of the row. I'm only going to go through about 70, and I'm going to delete the rest of the table just for simplicity's sake, but you're welcome to go as far as you want to go. So now, whenever we add a new budget, it will automatically populate the next month. So now we need to do the calculations for how much we've actually spent in the month. And this is going to be a little bit more of a in-depth formula, but don't worry, just follow along. So we're going to put equals if, open parentheses, is blank, open parentheses, B3, which is again the budget, because we only want this to show up if the budget exists. We'll put a comma, comma, so that way it's blank if it doesn't. Then we'll put if, open parentheses, today, open parentheses, close parentheses, is greater than A3, which is our month start right there. We'll put a comma, open parentheses, sum ifs, open parentheses, we'll type amount, then we need the expenses amount, comma, transaction date, comma, greater than or equal to, inside quotes, an ampersand, cell A3, comma, transaction date, comma, inside quotes, put less than, an ampersand, then select A4. Now make sure you put less than and not less than or equal to, because this is the first of the next month. So we only want to include things that are through the last day of the month. Comma, expense type, comma, inside quotes, we'll put debit. And the reason why we're choosing debit is because we're only going to include things that are credit or debit. That way, if there's a card payment or something that's not one of those two, it won't be included in this list. All right, so I'm going to close out the parentheses for here, hit plus, and I'm going to go right in front of sum ifs all the way through debit, copy that, paste it right after that plus sign, and change debit to credit. If you remember, the credit is going to be a negative number on our expenses list. So that's why even though we're adding them, we're adding a negative number, so it's going to subtract from the total. Now we're going to close this parentheses, put a comma, then we're going to close the parentheses twice. So what this is saying is if B3, which is the budget, is blank, then it's going to be blank. If today is greater than A3, then we're going to add all of the debits and all of the credits if they fall within the range between A3 and A4. And if today is not greater than A3, aka it's in the future, then it's simply going to return a blank and we'll be done. So I'll press enter and we're good to go there. And I'll drag this formula down through the rest of the column. And this is blank because we have no transactions in there, but if I were to change this to, let's say, December, you can see that now we have $20 in there because we have that 20 from our test before. That happened on the 26th of December. So now we have our actual spending set up, and we need to add our calculation for our difference. So for that formula, we'll put equals if, open parentheses, is blank, open parentheses, B3, close parentheses, comma, comma. And you're probably noticing a trend here. We'll be using that formula combination a lot. If, open parentheses, today, open parentheses, close parentheses, is greater than A3, which is our month start date, comma, C3 minus B3, comma, blank, close parentheses, close parentheses. So now if the budget is blank, the difference will be blank. And if today is less than the date that's listed in column A, then it's going to be blank as well. Otherwise, it's going to subtract the actual spending from the budget. You can see we've only spent $20. We have a budget of $4,000. So our total difference is negative $3,980 because we are $3,980 under budget. All right, so we need to add some formatting here. So difference, we need to change this column type to a number and currency because this is all currency. Same thing for the actual, change that to currency. Budget, change that to currency. And the month, we're going to change that to a date. Now, on top of that, we're going to select the entire column, go to 1, 2, 3 in the toolbar where it says More Formats, go to Custom Date and Time, and we're going to delete the day as well as one of the slashes in between. And I'm going to format this as a month as an abbreviation by clicking on the drop-down. And then I'll leave the year as a 4-digit year. I'm actually going to change the slash to a dash. And I'll put a space on each side of that dash just to make things clean. So once I hit apply, it will automatically update the format to be December-2024. And you can format this however you want. I just think that looks nice and neat. Next, we're going to set up some conditional formatting. So I'm going to select cell D3 and go all the way through the end of the column. Then go to Format, Conditional Formatting. And right here it says Apply to Range, D3 to D70. You can also make the adjustments to the range right there. Where it says Format Cells If, I'm going to use the drop down to select the less than or equal to and put a 0. I'll make the background none. I'm going to change the font text color to a dark green. And that's all we need there. So I'm going to click Add Another Rule to duplicate it. And then I'll put greater than, so greater than 0, and I'm going to change the font to red. Perfect. So now if it is a negative number, aka we spent under, it's going to automatically be formatted as a green color. And if we have a budget that's less than the actual, it will automatically be formatted in red to show that we spent over the amount that we were supposed to. All right, so the monthly budget tab is now complete. And we actually need to do one more thing on the expense tracker. We need to add some conditional formatting to the amount. That way, if it's credit and it's positive, it will flag. Or if it's one of the items that are not credit or debit, it will also flag. So to do this, we'll need to click on cell E3 and select all the way through the end of the column. And you can do so quickly by holding down Command Shift and press down, or Control Shift and press down. Then we'll go to Format, Conditional Formatting. Where it says Format Cells If, we'll use the drop down to select Custom Formula Is. Then in this formula box, we'll type equals and open parentheses B3 equals. Inside quotes, we'll put credit, then put a comma. E3 is greater than 0, close parentheses. Now, super important, you need to make sure that the row right here, so for example, B3 and E3, matches the first row that's in your range. So if this said E2, for example, it would need to read B2 and E2. Reason why this is important is otherwise it will go based off of the incorrect range to be applied to the wrong thing. So if we had B3 here and we had E2 here, it will look at cells B3 and E3, whatever is in those, but the actual formatting would be applied to the second row. All right, so I'm going to click on fill color and change that background to red, change the text color to white, and hit done. Now we need to add another rule. We'll click Format Cells If, go back down to that Custom Formula Is, and we're going to type and, open parentheses, and, open parentheses, B3 is not equal to, inside quotes, we'll put debit, comma, B3 is not equal to, inside quotes, we'll put credit, close the parentheses, put a comma, E3 is greater than 0, close parentheses. So what this is saying is that if the type is not credit and not debit, but E3, the amount, is greater than 0, then we want that to be conditionally formatted as well. And I'm going to go ahead and add that same coloration so that way it is red background, white text, and hit done. Now right here, it's showing that we have something. It looks like we have a space, so that's why it's flagging as incorrect, and we're good to go. Perfect, so if we have a 45, for example, it's going to show red unless we have this debit checked, then it will be cleared. If we have this changed to credit, it will show red. All we have to do is have it at negative because it's a credit. Now, if we were to select something else and it's a negative, it will be good to go because we want that to subtract from the totals. All right, so we're all set up there. All right, so we're going to move on to the projected weekly budget tracker now. And this one is going to look difficult. Really, it's a lot of copy and pasting. Don't get overwhelmed. You can do 3 months at a time to start, then you can kind of go from there. All right, so each of our weeks is going to take up 2 columns. So I'm going to go ahead and make column C a bit tiny, so that way I can easily differentiate. I'm going to make A and B just a little bit bigger. You can make them the same exact size by selecting both of the columns, then dragging this line in between them. Now I'm going to select cells A1 and B1, go to Data, Data Validation, Add Rule, and I want this to be a valid date, just like last time. Then we'll reject the input and hit Done. And now we're going to add some color. And you can make this whatever color scheme you want. This is just what I'm making it. So I'm going to select cells A2 through B2. And I'm going to change it to a dark green background with a white font. And then before I go too far, I'm going to click on the line just above the 1 and drag that beneath row 1. What this does is it freezes the panel. That way if I scroll down, I'll still be able to see exactly what's going on without having to do anything. The amount that you do here will depend on how many income sources you have. So if you go to the Bills tab, right now we have 6 set up. Don't include the total. We have 6 set up. So if you only have 3, you can make it smaller. I'm just going to go based off of what we have. So we have 6 setups, so that would go through 7, and then I want to have 1 for miscellaneous. That way, if I get a random Venmo from a friend for my birthday, I can go ahead and add it in without having to actually adjust anything later on. So I'm going to go down to 8, and I'm going to change the background color to a more light green color. I don't want this to be a one-time thing. I want this to be a dynamic thing, so that way if something changes later on in your bill pay, it will automatically update without you having to actually update it manually. So I'm going to type in index, open parentheses, pay type, comma 1, comma 0. So you can see here it automatically flows through income 1. Now if I were to change this name to, say, Olin, if I go to project tracker, you'll see that it automatically updates. So that's why we're doing it this way, to make it super easy for you to not have to adjust things later on. And now all we need to do is drag the formula down. This right here is pointing to row 1. Now we need it to point to row 2. And we'll just do this until we've reached all of the different options. So point 2, 4, 5, and 6. Then at the very bottom, we'll put MISC for miscellaneous, and we're good to go there. Now for A1, we want to select the Sunday of the week that we start with. That's what I do, at least. I'm here in the States, so we think of weeks on a Sunday through Saturday basis. But if you're over in a different part of the country and you think of weeks on a Monday through Sunday basis, then do that. It doesn't really matter. It's just your spreadsheet. So I'm going to go ahead and put the 22nd. And then for B1, I'm going to put equals A1 plus 6. The reason why we're doing 6 is because that way it goes through the end of the week. All right, and I actually did forget one item, so I'm going to click on the second row, click insert one row above, and we need our starting pay. So this is how much money we currently have in our checking account when the week starts. So this one, I'll go ahead and put a placeholder as $1,000. For income 1, we're going to put equals XLOOKUP, select income 1 as the search key, put a comma. The lookup range is going to be pay type. And then the return range is going to vary depending on which week of the month it is. In this case, This is the 4th week of the month. And if you don't know which week it is, you can simply double click right here and count. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the 4th week of the month. So I'm going to put week 4 and then put a comma. That way it's blank if it's missing. So you can see right here we have a blank, and that's because if I go to my bills tab on week 4, there is nothing listed for income 1, so everything's working properly. Now I can drag this formula down through the rest of the income streams, and it will populate anything that is actually there. So everything's good to go there. I'm going to go ahead and format all of this as numbers. And cool. All right, now this is our income section. You can think of the green as the income. Now for the non-income section, how big this is will depend on how many bills you have on average each week. You can make it as big, you can make it bigger than you need to. That way, if you want to add some one-time expenses, you have room to, whatever you want to do. I'm going to go ahead and just do all the way through 26. Then go to fill color. And you can make this whatever color scheme you want. It's really not a big deal. I'm going to use a lighter green. And then I'm going to select the entire area right here. Go to insert, drop down from arrange. Click the 4 little boxes, click into the data range. And in my bills tab, I'm going to select all of the different bills that I have. And I'm going to go all the way through the end of the column, even though I don't need to. So if I add anything later on, I don't have to worry about skipping it. Now it will automatically pull through everything that's right here. If you want to reorder some things, you're more than welcome to. Just make sure you do it on the bill tab. Otherwise, you can just go through. Also, if you want to add color, you're more than welcome to do that as well. I don't do that personally. I want things to be uniformed on my projected weekly budget tracker. So I'm going to hit done. Now on here, now it has this little gray box. I personally don't like that. If you want that to be there, you're more than welcome to. Instead, I want it to look like this, where it's simply a drop down, but it's kind of in line with a similar format to everything else. So I'm going to go back into this. And then down here at the bottom where it says advanced options, instead of chip style, I'm just simply going to put arrow. And now it will be the same color as you had before, just have a little arrow for the drop down. I'll hit done and I'll be good to go. Now I'm going to put a dash, and it's going to by default be a dash for everything that's not filled out. Down at the bottom, I'm going to change this color to a different color. I'm going to put this blue and make that white, and this will be savings. Underneath that, we'll put total, and I'm going to do a sum of everything that's here. So it automatically did. We'll make sure it applied to the right cells. Looks like it was B2 through B27, so we're all good to go there. If it doesn't apply, just make sure you adjust the cells to be only including the starting pay through the savings. And I'm going to change the background color of this to this dark green and change the font color to white. Now, below that, I'm going to simply copy here and paste that. And this is as far down as we need, so I'm going to leave 1 as a buffer, then select row 32 all the way down through the end of the column and delete all of those rows. So now everything is nice and locked. We don't have a whole bunch of excess cells taking up space. All right, so this is where the magic happens. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a formula. And this is a very complex formula, so I'm not going to get into the specifics. I'm just going to explain what it does. It looks at the dates. If the dates are within 30 days from today and it's a credit card, then it's going to take the credit card payment for this month. If it's within 60 days, but not in 30 days, then it's going to look up the credit card and take the credit card payment for next month that we have on our bills tab. And if there is no credit card, it's going to return a 0. On top of that, we're going to add in any debits that have happened within this date range to that amount. And we're going to subtract any credits that have happened within that date range to that amount. This will make sense in a second. Just bear with me. I'm going to make this as clear as possible, but just follow along and you'll be fine. So I'm going to put equals if, open parentheses, B, $1, and make sure you're not leaving out that $, it's super important, minus min, open parentheses, $1, colon, $1, close parentheses, is less than 30, comma, X lookup, A10. And the reason why it's A10 is because we're in the 10th row. If you're not in the 10th row making this formula, adjust the row to be whatever row you are in. Comma, credit cards, and we'll select the credit cards column of credit cards, comma, amount due this month, comma, XLOOKUP, A10, comma, bill name, comma, amount due, and this is in the bills tab, bills table I should say, comma, close parentheses, times -1. Then we'll put a comma. All right, so that's done for the first part. Now, just for simplicity's sake to read easier, I'm going to split the cell by clicking on Option and Return. So now it's going to go towards this second area right here. So if B $1 minus min $1 colon $1 close parentheses is less than 60, comma, XLOOKUP, A10, comma, credit cards, comma, amount due next month, comma, XLOOKUP, A10, comma, bill name, comma, amounts due, comma, close parentheses, times -1, comma. Now I'll split this and put some ifs, open parentheses, expenses amount, comma, category under expenses, comma, A10, comma, transaction date, comma, inside quotes, greater than or equals to, ampersand, $1, comma, transaction date, comma, inside quotes, less than or equal to, ampersand, B, $1, comma, type, this is the expense type, comma, inside quotes, debit, close parentheses. We'll go to the next line. Copy everything from the plus through the debit, paste that underneath, and change debit to credit. And I actually second guessed my formula while I was doing this, and I do need to make an edit to include what I originally had. Don't know why I second guessed myself. So, right after the two parentheses up here, then right before this asterisk on the row below, we're going to put XLOOKUP, open parentheses, A10, comma, bill name, comma, amount due, comma, close parentheses, then we have the multiply by -1 and close parentheses. All right, so now we press enter and we should have a 0. Now if we go here to groceries, it will automatically put our budget for there. If we say credit card 1, it will put whatever the bills say are the amount due this week, which is 500. And the reason why it's showing that instead of this one for next month is because this date is within 30 days from today. So everything's working properly. All right, now I want to go ahead and change this all to currency with the exception of this. I want that to be a date, and we're good. All right, so here I recommend, just for simplicity's sake, adding in all of your weekly occurrences. So I'll say groceries, discretionary, work lunch, whatever. That way you don't have to add those in later. You don't want to add any of your monthly bills for this until later because they will vary week to week. But realistically, we're all set to simply select cells. But realistically, we're all set to simply copy A through C, and then click on D and paste it. Now, before we go any farther, we want to make a couple of edits. So for D1, we're going to put equals B1 plus 1. And now we'll automatically update the dates to be the next week. For starting pay, we're going to put equals and select the total from the week prior. And that will give you whatever the total is after everything's said and done. And then we actually need to go back real quick. So here I want to do the total that I have in our savings account. So I'll say 1,000 minus whatever we have here in savings. And then for this one, I'll put equals B30 minus whatever we have here in savings. So for example, if I were to budget in $500 coming out of my account, it will automatically be added to the savings. And then conversely, if I need to take $500 out of my savings and put it into my account, it will automatically add to the total and be subtracted from the savings. So same thing here. You can see here now we have $500 there, $0 in savings. But if I were to change this to a negative, then it would go the opposite way. All right, so now we have this week and we have next week. Let's go ahead and go to View, Show, Formulas. Just to make sure everything has a formula, we have not dragged this formula down, so we need to make sure we do that. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this formula down there. I'll drag this formula down over here. So now everything is looking good. Everything that should have a formula does have a formula. And everything that doesn't have a formula shouldn't have a formula. Cool, so I'm going to go to View, Show, Formulas to uncheck that. And now we're good. So I'm going to resize this a little bit. You can make this whatever size you want. It doesn't really matter. All right, so before I go further, I'm simply going to make this center just so it looks a little bit nicer. And I should be good from there. So let's go ahead and select columns D through F. We'll hit Command C or Control C to copy it. Select G, and then do Control V to paste it. Then we'll paste it here, and we'll keep doing this over and over again until you reach the end of the year, or however long you want to go. Now, what you can do as well, once you get going, is let's go ahead and just select a whole bunch of columns. We'll insert that many columns to the right. And then you don't want to include the first one. And the reason why we don't want to include this week is because we don't have the formulas for the starting pay and everything else that we do in the following weeks. But once you get going, you can go ahead and copy all the way through what you have, and then paste it. So that way you can do a whole bunch of them at one time instead of having to only do a few. We'll continue this until we get to the very end of the year, or however far you want to go. I recommend that first go at least through the end of the year. If you want to add it on later on, you're more than welcome to do that. Okay, so I have all the way through the end of the year now. But if you look at here, we have this week 4 for every single week. We don't want that, but we can't just copy and paste because things are a little bit different on where they actually fall each month. So here we have week 4. Here we have week 1. So I'm going to change that to week 1, then change that down. Whenever the first of the month falls on a Wednesday or later, I usually push that into the following week. If it's before Wednesday, then I include that in the current week. The reason why I do it that way is because I don't want it to fall on a Saturday, for example, and then all of our bills are due at the very beginning of the week, but we're not getting paid till the end of the week. It looks like we have more money than we actually do, which could cause a little bit of stress that week. So that's why I do it this week. We're going to go ahead and change this for a 4-week period. So I'll change this to the 2nd week, this to the 3rd week. Then this is already the 4th week. You can see right here we do have a 5th week in January. So I'm going to change this to week 5. And now we're good. So instead of having to go through everything again, I'm simply going to copy weeks 1 through weeks 4. Make sure not to include week 5. And then we'll go to the following week, paste that there. And if you want to double check, you can simply click on the cells and you'll see that it is acting correctly. And we'll keep doing that over and over again until we reach the end of the months that are populated. Pay attention for any 5-week months. For example, in April, I'm going to go ahead and paste this here. And here I'm just simply going to change week 4 to week 5. I only want to look at 2025 right now, so I'm going to go ahead and select whatever I have into 2026. And then right-click, View More Column Actions, Group Columns FG to O. Sorry, FG to FO. And now I can minimize that. Cool. So the base of it is set. Now all we have to do is go through and add every single item that's on our bill list based on the due date. So we have all of our discretionary already in here. That's repeating. But if we look at the due dates themselves, so rent is on the 1st, student loans is on the 5th. We need to go through, look at the dates that are here, and select those options. So rent's on the 1st. You can see the 5th is actually in this week here, so we will go ahead and put student loans on the 5th. Now keep in mind that if you want to put this in a different week ahead of when they're due, if you want to go ahead and pay the student loan on this week instead of that week for whatever reason, you're more than welcome to. You can always add it here, you can always change it later, whatever you want to do. But you'll go through and every single week you can put this there. What you can do is you can go ahead and assign everything, and then then you can copy and paste just like we did before to previous weeks, and then just adjust what needs to be adjusted. But this is probably the most tedious part of everything. Once this is done, you'll be smooth sailing from there. All right, just to save some time on this video, I went ahead and added everything off screen, so that way you don't have to sit there and watch me do it. You can do yours instead, so just pause the video, then come back. Here's a pro tip before you do that. If you want, you can double click on the tab and duplicate it. And now you can drag this to a new window. So now, instead of having to go back and forth between the bill screen, remind yourself what dates things are due, you can simply resize things to have both on one screen. And then click on the bills right here so you can see exactly what the bills are, and then simply add them based off the drop down to what you need to do. All right. So now that you're done with that, we can go ahead and continue with the spend calendar. So what we're going to do here is we are going to build this. And what this does is you'll be able to select the first of whatever month you want to look at, and you can see everything that was spent. So you can see which days are no spend days, which days aren't spend days. You can select whether you want to see everything or only discretionary and groceries. And this way you can see if there's any trends. For example, if every Friday night you're going out and spending $200 on discretionary income, maybe you want to do that, maybe you don't. I don't know. It's you. Cool. All right, so back over here, we're going to select cells B2 through H27. Let's go ahead and give it an outside border just so we know what's going on. We'll select all of B2 through H2, merge that together. Make it a little bit bigger since that will be our date. We'll go to data validation, add rule, drop down to is valid date, reject the input if it's not, and hit done. So now we can use a pop-out calendar to select whatever date we want to look at. I'll go ahead and select December 1st, 2024. But we don't want it to be in this form. We want it to be in just showing the date. So I'm simply going to go to the 1, 2, 3 in the toolbar and go to More Formats. Go to Custom Date and Time. I'm going to delete everything except for the month. And then put month as full name. And hit Apply. So now, even though technically on the back end it's a date, it's the 1st of the month, it's only going to show the date as a full month. Let's go ahead and make it a little bit bigger. Cool. All right, you can make this whatever color scheme you want. I'm going to go ahead and make it kind of a green color. So let's go ahead and add color there. And then I will add the same color right below it. Before I do that, I want to add a border around the date just for some separation. And here we're going to add the days of the week. So I'm going to put Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And let's go ahead and give this a grid as well. And then just underneath that, let's go ahead and make this have a background of this light gray color. And we're going to do a calculation, and this calculation is going to be for the days. So here in B4, we'll put equals EO month, open parentheses, and we'll select the month name right here. You'll see it says B2, and that's because that's where the merge starts, so that's perfect. We'll put in -1, close the parentheses, minus weekday, open parentheses, B2, comma, 3. All right, so even though we have December selected, it will show part of November. And the reason why we're doing it this way is because sometimes the days don't exactly align. They don't exactly align with clean weeks. So we need to have essentially 6 weeks worth of weeks shown for us to be able to capture everything depending on how things situate. So we have that now. We're simply going to put equals B4 plus 1. And then we'll drag this over. Now we're going to select 3 rows. We'll merge those together. Now I'm going to click on one and then click paint. And I'll paint right next to it. So I clicked on cell B5 and it automatically applied that same merge to there. That's just a quick way of applying the same formatting to everything else without having to go through and merge everything over and over again. Cool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this, paste it right underneath in cell B8. And you get this number error, and that's because everything shifted. All we have to do is press equals, select the last date that we have, and put +1. And now we have the next week automatically populated. We'll do that again a few times, and the format's going to get a little bit messed up, but don't worry about that. We'll clean that up in a bit. Cool. So now we have the last week of November, all of the weeks of December, and part of January where it rolls over. Now, as I mentioned, it doesn't always align perfectly. So if we go to January 2025, for example, you can see that we have January starting on the Wednesday of the first week, and the entire last week is full of February instead. So like I said, it kind of flip-flops depending on what month and where things start. That's why we have so many rows to make sure that we are covered and nothing gets missed. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and uncheck everything. So we'll select all of the calendar, click clear borders. And then I'm going to go ahead and put outer borders. And then I want it to just be cross borders for all of them. I don't want these to be as big, so I'm going to click on this little line right here for the border style and make them smaller. All right, so that's good to go now. Now we need to set up some conditional formatting, but before we do that, let's go ahead and add our drop down. So I'm going to merge cells B and C just to have a little bit more space. Go to Insert, Drop Down. And I'll put discretionary, and groceries, and everything. Let's give it some color. So I'll give discretionary brown, discretionary and groceries a yellow, and everything a black. And now we're good. So whenever we select a new option, all we have to do is drop right down there. All right, so now we need to add some conditional formatting. But before we do, let's make this A just a little bit smaller. I'm going to select cells A1 through H27. Then go to Format, Conditional Formatting. I'm going to say date is today. And I'm going to make that a blue with a white color. Now you can see here that today is December 28th. That's when I'm filming this, so that's why it's popped up. It will show something different if you film it on a different day. All right, and just so you know, the order of these do matter. It's going to stop whenever it hits that first conditional formatting rule. So for example, if I have date is today and date is greater than December 25th, it will show as blue instead of whatever else because that one shows up first. All right, so I'm going to click into it again, then click add another rule to clone it. Now we're going to change it to format cells if is equal to 0. I'm going to clear the background color and make this a blue font and hit done. So now if the number is equal to 0, then it'll be blue. Click into it, add another rule, change this to between. And with this, you can do whatever range you want to do. I do 0 to 50 from our first one. So basically what this is doing is it's calculating how much you spend, and if it falls within specific ranges, it's going to be different colors. So if I spent $50 or less on that day, I'm cool with that. I'm going to make it a green color. Then I'll click add another rule. And I'll change this to 50 to 150. I'll make that yellow. And then 150 to 500, make that red. And change this from 500 to whatever the maximum you think that you're going to spend. So let's say 6,000. And we'll change this to a dark purple, let's say. Now the reason why we're not just putting greater than or equals to is because on the back end, all of these dates are actually numbers. So if we were to put greater than or equal to 500, all of these dates would be formulated with that same exact coloration because 46,000 or whatever that date is greater than 500. So that's why we're putting a limit. You can put however high a limit you want and then hit done. Now we're going to add another rule. Is empty. I want this to be none, and we'll leave this as just black. Add another rule. This time we're going to drop it all the way down to the bottom to do custom formula is, and put equals month, open parentheses, $B, $2, close parentheses, is not equal to month, open parentheses, A1, close parentheses. And if that's the case, let's make this a light gray color. That's fine, have black, and hit done. Now what this did, I already kind of formatted it so you can't see it, but what this did is if I clear this formatting, it will only highlight in gray the ones that are not equal to this month. So for example, these November dates are not in December, so that's why they're not highlighted. But all of these dates are in December, so that's why they are highlighted. All right, let's go back into the rules, add another rule. This time we're going to change the not equal sign to equals, and we're going to change that to whatever color you want that to be. So let's make that a green color, for example, and hit done. Then the last thing we want to do is change the formatting look of this. So instead of having the full date, all I want is the actual date itself. So I'm going to highlight the entire row, go to 1, 2, 3, custom date and time, delete what's currently there, use the drop down to add a day, and I want to have a day with a leading 0, then hit apply. And now we're good. So you can see that all the other rows also did the same formatting, and that's because they're all tied in together with the formulas. All right, so now everything looks nice and neat. So if I go to a different month, you should see that it automatically updates. So that way anything that's in January is in green, anything that is not in January is in gray. So now we need the formula to count how much has actually been spent on that day for these specific categories. All right, so let's go ahead and change this back to December. And then over here in cell B5, we'll type equals if, open parentheses, $B, $1, equals, inside quotes, discretionary. And this needs to match exactly what is listed right here. So if you have something different, like only discretionary or something else, make sure it matches what this option is. So if it's equal to discretionary, I want to take some ifs of the amount, expenses amount, comma, and the transaction date, comma, click on B4, comma, discretionary, expenses discretionary to be specific, comma, inside quotes, yes, comma, type, expenses type, comma, debit, close parentheses, plus, I'm going to copy this SUMIFS formula, make this a little bit bigger so you can actually read it, I'm going to change this to credit. And the reason why we're doing this is because we only want it to include everything that is debit or credit. We don't want to have any payments or anything like that if it's part of discretionary. All right, so the first part's done. I'm going to go ahead and break the line just to make it easier for you to see. And I'm going to copy all of this. Now I'm going to paste it all again. I'm going to change this to discretionary and groceries. And once again, make sure it matches what you have right here. We have discretionary and groceries, so that's why it works. And then this time where it says discretionary, I'm going to change that to discretionary and groceries. And then right down here where it says discretionary, I'm going to change that to discretionary and groceries. All right, do this one more time. All right, and this time I'm going to change this to everything. And I'm going to delete this clause entirely. That's because we want to include everything, not just whether it's marked as yes or no for that line. Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and close these and press enter. All right, so now we have a 0. Let's go ahead and format this as money, and let's make it centered in the cell. So we have everything locked in that we need to when it comes to looking up the range. So now we can simply drag this formula over. We'll copy it. We'll paste it underneath, paste it underneath, paste it underneath, paste it underneath, paste it underneath. All right, so now we should be good to go. If we go back to our expense tracker, let's test it out. So right now, the only thing that we have is groceries. So this should not show up under discretionary, but it should show up under discretionary and groceries. So if we go back to our spend calendar, change this to discretionary and groceries. Oh, looks like it's already there. We can see that it's $20 right here. And you can see that it's in green, so everything's working properly when it comes to the amount. Now let's test it out a little bit more. Let's add a few more items. So let's say debit, let's say discretionary, credit card 2, let's say we spend $600. Now if we go back to the spend calendar, it will say $620 and the amount exceeds that maximum threshold, so that's why it's this purple color. Now let's test out one more thing. If we go to the 26th, let's do credit. Let's say we got a credit for groceries for the amount of $50. That should reduce the amount, which it does, so everything's good to go there. So everything works for groceries. Now let's go ahead and simply copy these items. I'm going to change this to discretionary, and I'm going to change this to student loan, for example. And let's go ahead and give it a new date. Let's say the 19th of December. All right, so now we have on the 19th of December, $620 under discretionary and grocery. If I click just discretionary, it will show $620, which matches what we have. And then if I click everything, it will decrease to $570 due to that credit being there. Let's go ahead and add this as a debit, make sure that it is working properly. Go back to our spend calendar and it increased perfectly. So everything's working just as planned. You don't really need to have any of the other columns here. So we can select column J through the end of all the different columns and delete those rows and delete those columns. And then I can select everything from row 29 through the end of the columns and delete everything. So that way it's nice and neat for you and there's not a lot of clutter. All right, so that's the spend calendar. So the last two that we have are the worksheet and the dashboards. Fair warning, the worksheet is going to be pretty involved, but this is what's needed for the dashboards to make sense. All right, so the worksheet's actually going to be hidden. It's just more of a flow through to get everything in order that we need to get in order for the dashboards to work. So I'm going to select all of columns A through D, go to Format, Alternating Colors, and pick whatever alternating color you want. I'm going to click this blue and hit Done. I'll make this column E a little bit smaller just for formatting's sake. Now I'm going to do a query formula. You don't need to know how this works. You can just type it in and it will work fine. So query, I'm going to put monthly all, Inside quotes, put select A, comma, D, space where A is not null and D is not null. In the quote, close parentheses, and press enter. So what this is doing is it's pulling anything from this monthly budget tab where A is not null and D is not null. The reason why it's only showing the first one is because D only exists one time. But if we were to change this to, say, November, we'll have multiple. And I've realized that we did never drag this formula down, so let's go ahead and drag all these formulas down to the end of the column. Cool, so now we have two different ones. And if I go back to my worksheet, I should see two populate. Now right here, we're going to say over and under. And we'll use this formula. We'll say array formula. If, open parentheses, is blank, open parentheses, comma, comma, if, open parentheses, $B, 2, colon, $B, is greater than 0, comma, $B, 2, colon, $B, comma, 0. Close parentheses, close parentheses, close parentheses. And press enter. So if this number is greater than 0, it will return whatever number that says. And if it's not greater than 0, it's going to return a 0. Now, oppositely, if I go over here, I can say greater than or equal to. And now if it's less than 0, then it's going to return whatever that number is. Otherwise, it's going to return a 0. So just so you can see a little bit better, go back to our monthly budget. Let's say that our budget for December was actually only $1,000, so now we have an overage of $240. Now you can see that the $240 is now in the over category instead of the under category. I'm going to go ahead and make all of these currencies. And cool, we're good to go there. All right, now I'm going to select F2 through S6. Go to Format, Alternating Colors. And I'm going to make this a green color. You can do whatever color scheme you want. Then in F2, we're going to type month. Under that, we'll put date, location. Under that, current balance plus savings. Then current balance and current savings. Here, we'll put current balance. Then we'll put month plus 1. And then from there, we're simply going to drag this over to the end, and it will automatically populate the next number in the sequence. All right, so date location, this is simply going to show what the formula needs to point to when it comes to the rows. So we'll put 1 here. Under month plus 1, we'll put equals G3 plus 12. And then we're just going to drag this formula over. Now this formula is very complex, but essentially what we're doing is we are extracting the current balance and or the balance as of these columns to have those for our dashboards. So in cell G4, we'll type equals filter, open parentheses, and then we're going to go to our projected weekly tracker, and we're simply going to select the totals. So this is 28 through 28. I'm going to press F4 to go ahead and anchor that in. Then we're going to put a comma, put column, open parentheses, select that again, close parentheses, equals, min, open parentheses, filter, open parentheses, column, open parentheses, select row 28 again, close parentheses, comma, len, open parentheses, select row 28 again, close parentheses, close parentheses, close parentheses, plus, then we'll go back to our worksheet, and we're going to select G3, and then close the parentheses. All right, so that's the first part. Now, for simplicity's sake, we're going to press plus. I'm going to copy all of this, and then paste it underneath. So now we can simply change this. So now instead of 30, so what this says up top, this is giving us the total, which is in row 28. Now we need to get the savings as well, which is in row 30. So in our worksheet, we're going to put 30 where every 28 is. Perfect, and I just realized I never anchored in those ranges. So I'm gonna go ahead and anchor in the ranges real quick. And once again, you can do so quickly by pressing F4. And there we go. All right, so now we have 2,370. If I go to my projected weekly tracker, I can see we have 1,870 here, and we have 500 here. If you look at the bottom right, the sum is 2,370, so everything is working properly. All right, so that's for the current week. Now I'm going to drag the formula over, and we should have everything for each of these weeks. So if we go back to our weekly budget tracker, and we go 12 columns over, we can go ahead and see that this is 4,100. And if we go back to our worksheet, 4,100. So everything appears to be working properly. All right, now I just realized that we never anchored in the 3, so I'm going to go ahead and anchor in this 3. And I'm going to anchor in this 3. And then this one right here is missing a anchor. So now everything should be good to go to drag these down. So let's go ahead and drag this over to have everything. Then copy. And we're going to paste this. And this time we don't need to have the savings portion. And I'll go ahead and drag this formula over to the right. I'm going to paste this again under savings. This time we don't need to have the balance portion. We just want the savings. And I'm going to drag this over to the right. Cool, so now we're all good with this table right here. All right, now we're going to select F8 through R17. Now, one thing to know about this is that this is going to be for our weekly recurring budgets. So if you have a lot of weekly recurring budgets, you might need to expand this a little bit further, but it's easy enough to do. So we're going to select that range, go to Format, Alternating Colors, and I'll just select this brown color. In cell F8, I'm going to put week. Under that, I'll put weeks back. Then I'll put total, weekly, target, date. All right, so instead of typing out every single one of your weekly budget, I'm going to say query, open parentheses, go to our bills tab. I'm going to select A2 through the end of column B, comma, inside quotes, put select B where A equals, inside soft quotes, we're going to type weekly, in that soft quote, in the quote, close parentheses, and press enter. So now we have all of our different weekly recurring incomes. If I were to add a new one, so for example, let's say that travel is now weekly, it will automatically be added to the bottom. So keep that in mind when you add new weekly recurring budgets. You may need to expand this to make sure everything is included. Okay, so over here in R8, we're going to put current week. Then we're going to drag that over to Q8 and put -1. Now I'm going to drag this over, and this one goes to -0 for some reason, so I'm going to do -2 to show it what the trend is. Select both of these and then use the fill handle to go the rest of the way. And now you should see that it goes all the way through current week 11. I'm going to make these a little bit wider so we can actually read what's being said, and now we're good. Now under current week, we're going to put 0. And then under current week -1, we're going to put equals R8 -7. So it should be a -7. Then I'm simply going to drag these formulas over. So it should say negative 77 after that. Now for the weekly target, we just want to have the total amount that we're expecting to spend. So we'll put sum if. We'll put due date, comma, inside quotes, weekly, put a comma, and then put amount due. This is amount due for the week, not the month. Now if I look for the bills, I can see that we have $300 that's due each week, so everything's working properly. I'll go back to my worksheet, and I'm going to make this a currency, then drag this formula over to the right. And this will be the same thing over and over again because there is no variable information. It's simply tracking what the amount due is for what's budgeted. Now for the date, we're going to start over here in cell R12. And type equals filter, open parentheses. Go to our projected weekly tracker and select the first column. Go ahead and anchor that in. Comma, column, open parentheses. Select that first column and anchor that in again. Close the parentheses, equals min, open parentheses, filter, open parentheses, column, open parentheses. Select that first row again and anchor it in. Close parentheses, comma, lin, open parentheses. Select that first row again and then anchor it in. Close parentheses, close parentheses, close parentheses, close parentheses. So that should be 4 close parentheses. Then we'll go back to our worksheet and do plus R9. And that should give us the very first week that we have listed on our spreadsheet. So if I go back here to projected weekly tracker, yep, we have December 22nd, which is exactly what it spits out. All right, so now everything is dynamic, so we can simply drag this formula down, and we can see the date of the first Monday for every single week of the past 11 weeks. Well, 12 weeks really, since we're including this week. And we'll need these dates when it comes to factoring in the calculation of how much was spent. All right, so now for the groceries, we're going to put equals if, open parentheses, is blank, open parentheses. Select F13, which is our groceries. Close parentheses, comma, comma. Then we'll put sum ifs. Then we'll type amount. This will be the expenses amount. Comma, transaction date. Comma, inside quotes, greater than or equals to. In the quote, put an ampersand. And then select cell G12. And that's what contains our start date. Now we're going to anchor in the 12 with the $sign, but we are not going to anchor in the G. Put a comma, transaction date, put a comma, inside quotes, less than or equals to. In the quote, ampersand, G, $sign 12, plus 6, comma, expenses type, comma, inside quotes, we'll put debit, comma, category, so expenses category, comma, F13. And this time we are going to anchor in the F, but not the 13. And we'll close that parentheses. We'll copy all the way to the sum ifs, plus paste that. And we're simply going to change the debit to a credit. We'll close out the parentheses and press enter. Now we have $0 for that range. Before we go any further, let's go ahead and test that out. This is for the week of October 6th. So let's go to our expense tracker, double click here, go back to October. So let's say on October 8th, we have a debit for groceries. Let's say we put it on credit card 2 and it's going to be 40 bucks. Now if I go back to my worksheet, I should see 40 populate right there. So that's working fine. Now let's go back to our expense tracker. And let's say on the 10th of October, I have a credit for groceries Doesn't matter what credit card, and let's say $20 was refunded. If I go back to my worksheet, it's now at $20, so everything is working perfectly. So I can simply drag this formula over and it will give me all the information for each of the weeks. And then since we have everything locked in, I can go ahead and drag this down as well. And this will give me all of the information, all the totals for these specific categories for that time. Now you can see here that we have a formula inside this empty row and it's empty, and that's because this right here is empty. If we were to add a new category later on, that's a weekly recurring budget, then it will automatically be added. So that's just some nice practice to give you a little bit of a buffer. If you don't want it, you don't have to have it. For the total, we're simply going to take the sum of all of our discretionaries. So I'm going to go from G13 through G16, or whichever one you end with, and then drag this formula over to the right. All right, just under here in G18 or wherever you want to put it. So I'm going to go to Insert, Pivot Table. And then for the data range, we're going to go over to our expense tracker. And we want it to go through with the entire expense tracker. So I'll hit Done. Then I want it to be an existing sheet. And I will go back to our worksheet and select the cell that we want to start with. And then hit Create. All right, so under Rows, we're going to put Transaction Date. And you can see that these transaction dates are based off of the individual day. We don't want that. Instead, we're going to right-click on one of those dates. Click Create Pivot Date Group and say Year and Month. And now we have the year dash the month. I don't need to see the totals, so I'm going to unclick Show Totals. Under Columns, I'm going to put Category. And once again, I don't need the totals. Under Values, I'm going to put a calculated field, so I'll add the values, calculated field, and I'll type equals amount divided by 1,000. So now instead of showing a big number, it's going to show whatever that number is divided by 1,000. So if you spent $1,200 that month, it will show 1.2. All right, so for our filters, I'm going to put discretionary and groceries and put that as a yes because we only want to show the things that are discretionary and groceries in this pivot table. And this is all based off of that yes or no that we set up under our bills. So if you see something that shouldn't be there, make sure you include that in the discretionary and groceries column. All right, we're going to drag the transaction date underneath filters as well. And we're going to get a little fancy here. So I'm going to go to Filter by Condition and say greater than or equal to. Then we're going to type a formula here. So what we're doing is we want to have a rolling 12-month period. We don't want it to have anything more than that. So we're going to type equals EO month, open parentheses, today, open parentheses, close parentheses, comma, -12, close parentheses, +1. Cool, so now it will take today's date. It will look for 12 months prior, add one date to that end of month date, so that way it's the start of 12 months ago. And the best part about this is we don't have to worry about adding or adjusting the ranges later. It will automatically update as the new months roll over. All right, so we're good to go on this one. Now, just to the left of the transaction date, we're going to add a formula. So we're going to put budget, and I want to make the formatting look a little bit similar. So I'm going to go to the fill color, use this little dropper, and select the color in the pivot table, and change the format text to white. Now, for the formula, we're going to type equals array formula. If, open parentheses, is blank, open parentheses, G21, which is the same row that we're in right here, through G, close parentheses, comma, comma, sum if, open parentheses, bills due date, comma, inside quotes, we'll put weekly, comma, monthly total amount, close parentheses, divided by 1,000, close parentheses. So now we have 1.2. The reason why we have 1.2 here is because if we go to our bills right here, select all of our monthly amounts, and that totals 1,200. Cool, so essentially what this is doing is the same thing that this is doing here. It's just going based off of a monthly calculation instead of a weekly calculation. And it will update automatically right there. I'm going to click on the calculated field cell right here. That's the very top left corner of my pivot table, and hit copy. Go over as many buffer columns as you need to account for every single one of your different weekly budgets. And once you're done with that, simply paste. And this will give you a clone of what you have over here, but we're going to make some edits to it. So we're going to click into the little pencil to edit. And now instead of having discretionary and grocery, we're going to drag in subscription, and we're going to remove the discretionary and grocery. Now we don't have the option to click yes right now, and that's because there is nothing listed on our expense tracker. So I'm going to go ahead and add something. So let's go ahead and say for the 22nd, let's put a debit, and I'll put streaming service, credit card to $10. So now that we have the subscription option, we're good. So we can go back to our worksheet, subscription, uncheck everything except for yes, and hit OK. Now, unless you're going crazy with subscriptions, you don't need to actually do the calculated field here, so I'm going to exit out of that. And under values, simply put amount. Now you can see here it's summarizing by the count of the amount for some reason. Change that to sum, and now we can see that it was $10 in December that we spent on our streaming services. And everything is the same when it comes to the rolling 12 months, things like that. So when it comes to updating after that, you don't have to worry about changing anything else. You're good to go. Now we're going to click on sum of amount, go over to the right. And you don't need to go that far over since everything is in one column for the streaming services. And hit paste. Now we're going to edit. Instead of category, we're going to change that to payment type. Uncheck the show totals. And then under subscription, we're going to change that also to payment type. And where it says filter by condition, say is not empty. So now we can see that for credit card 1 in October, we spent negative $20. And in credit card 2, we spent $40 and so forth. All right, and I think it's finally time to build a dashboard. So let's go ahead over to dashboard. We'll bring this up. And we want to make something that looks somewhat like this. You can change the formatting, whatever you want to do, but this is what we're going for. All right, the first thing we're going to do is insert a chart. We use this chart type dropdown to select the scorecard. And now we need to show the data range. So I'm going to delete what's here, go to worksheet, and I'm going to select G4, and this is our current balance. Then I'll hit OK. You can see right here we have our G4 listed. Now I'm going to go to Customize, Chart and Axis Title. Let's give it the title of Current Total. I'll give it a dark green color, make it bold. Let's go ahead and center it. Let's make it a lot bigger, so we'll say Current Total. All right, now for the chart subtotal, we'll say Current Balance plus Savings. And we'll give it that same color and make it centered. All right, now for our key value, we're going to change this also to that same color. And now we're good to go. So let's go ahead and make this a little bit better formatted and put it right over here in the top left. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and change the font size a little bit so that way it fits better. So I'm going to change the title font to 30, and then the subtitle, I'm going to leave that as auto to adjust automatically. So now we have that first one. I'm going to copy this and paste it underneath. Edit chart. This time I want it to be pointing to worksheet G5. So I'll press enter. And this is just the balance. So if we go to worksheet G5, that's just the balance being listed. Now we need to adjust the title, obviously. So let's go to Customize. We'll go to the chart title. We'll change current total to current balance. The subtitle we no longer need. And I'm going to change the color to a blue color. And I'm going to go to the key value and change that to the same blue color. All right, so we have a little bit of a sizing issue still, so I'm going to fix that. No big deal. Just going to make it a little bit wider. And pro tip, whenever you have a same match, you can see different lines that are in blue underneath, showing you that everything is aligned. Now I'm going to copy this, paste that underneath, match that up, go to Edit Chart, change that from G5 to G6, press Enter, Customize, Chart Title, Current Savings, and I'll change this to a lighter green color. Then go to key value, change this to a lighter green color as well. I'm going to change this to be centered. And we're good to go. I'm going to go through and make sure that all of my other key values are also centered. And they were not. Perfect, so now they're all centered. Just to the right of that, we're going to go to Insert Chart. For the data range, we're going to clear out what's there and go back to our worksheet and select F11 through S17. That just gives a little bit of a buffer. Hit OK. Now we're going to change this from a column chart to a combo chart. Where it says stacking, we'll put standard. At the bottom, we're going to check all three of these options. Where it says weekly target, we don't want that. We want the date there instead. And then we'll put weekly target where the date is. All right, now we're going to go to Customize and go to Series. We'll change the type for all the options to columns. Now, I want to go just to the weekly target and change that to a line. And what this does is it gives us our target line. So we can know if we spent more than that, then that means that we spent too much. If we spent less than that, then that means we're good. All right, for the legend, I'm going to go ahead and put this on the right side. For the chart title, I'm going to put weekly budget spending. I'm going to make that centered. Subtitle, I'll say last 12 weeks. And I'm going to make that centered as well. And now we're all good, so once you add more, it will automatically populate. Let's go ahead and make this the same size as everything else. All right, just to the right of that, we're going to insert another chart. Click on the four little boxes, delete what's currently there. We're going to go to our worksheet. We're going to select the entire area right here. So A through D, and hit OK. We're going to select use row 1 as headers and use column A as labels. We want to make sure that we're treating the labels as text, otherwise it will act all funky. We're going to change this to a stat column chart, and then we'll have over and under. We don't need the difference. So I'm going to remove that, and now we simply have if it's over and if it's under. I'm going to go to Customize. We'll change this title to monthly spending. Change the subtitle to compared to budget. I'm going to make both of those centered just to keep things nice and neat. And these colors don't really mean anything to me, so I'm going to go ahead to the series and select over. And if we went over budget, that's not good, so I want that to be a red color. And if we went under budget, that is good, so we want that to be a green color. Cool, so now if the month was over budget, it will be red. If it's under budget, it will be green. Now I'm going to put this over to the right and make it the same size. And now I'm going to insert a chart. Change the chart type to an area chart. Select the four little boxes. Delete what's there, go to Worksheet, and we're going to select F2 through S6. Hit OK. All right, so we have our month there. Now we have our current balances, all that fun stuff. Now what we're going to do here is switch rows and columns, so that way we only have one option. Here, worksheet 2, that's perfectly fine. That shows us the months. And then here we want to have F4 to S4. The reason why we do that is because that is the total balance plus the savings. Now I can go to Customize, Chart Axis Title, and we're going to type 12 months total projection. I'm going to center that. In the subtitle, we'll put balance plus savings. And we'll center that. And I'm going to change the color of this, that way it is in line with what we have up here. So I'm going to change this to that darker green color. And then we're going to go to our series, and we're going to change that to the darker green color as well, just for continuity. And actually, we only need to have G2 to G6, not F2 to F6. So I'm going to change that, and that gets rid of that weird month that's right there. All right, now I'm going to simply move this over, make it look a little bit more aligned. And then I'm going to copy it and paste that just to the right. Click Edit Chart using these three little dots. I'm going to change this to G5. We'll leave everything else the same. We're going to customize it. Instead of having the chart title read Total Projection, we're going to say Balance Projection. And then the chart subtitle will just say Balance. And we're going to change this to be a dark blue color like we have up here. And then the series, we're going to change that to be a dark blue color as well. So that way we have everything kind of continuous. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to copy it, paste it over to the right. Edit chart. Change this to G6 to S6, which is our savings. Customize it, go to the title. We'll change the subtitle while we're here to savings. Chart title, savings. And the subtitle we need to change to that green color to make it match what we have over here. And then same thing with the series. We'll change that to that green color as well. Now everything's looking pretty good. So as you can see here, it's kind of formatted a little funky. That's because it's too big. So we're going to resize this to make sure everything fits nicely. All right, so now everything is all within the one screen for the most part. All right, now underneath that, we're going to add some more charts. So we're going to go to Insert Chart. Change this to a combo chart. Click the four little boxes. Get rid of that. Go back to our worksheet. And we're going to select everything right over here. Now with this, you can select as much as the ranges you want. Just make sure you anticipate any future data right there. If you don't, then you'll have some things that get added that are outside of the range. So I'm going to go ahead and just put F20 all the way through the end of column M, and then press OK. I'm going to click Use Row 20 as headers and use column F as labels. Now for the budget, I actually want this to be the transaction date and year. We don't need a label. Customize, series, let's change all of them to be columns. But since we got rid of the budget up here, we need to add budget back. So now we have budget down here. And we want that to remain a line so we can see exactly if something is going on. Now for stacking, we want that to be standard. So we can see if we've exceeded it or not. For customize, we want to make sure that the budget is easy to read. Right now, you can't really tell. So I'm going to go to budget, and I'm going to make the color this orange color. So that way you can see it pop out against the other colors. All right, now I'm going to go to apply to all the series and do total data labels. So that way we can see it's been 1.2. So this is 1.2 thousand that was spent inside of December. If you hover over each of the options, you can see how much was spent for each of these individual categories. But it shows the overall total at the very top. Now I'm going to go to chart and axis title. And for the title, I'm going to put monthly discretionary spending and make that centered. And that's all we need there. So I'm going to go ahead over here. And I'm going to resize it to fit within the same vibe as the one above it. Now just to the right of that, we're going to insert another chart. And we're going to make this one a line chart. Click on the four boxes, delete what's there, go back to the worksheet. And we're going to click on transaction date and streaming date, go all the way through the end of the column, and hit OK. I'm going to click Use Row 20 as headers and use column Q as labels. For customize, we're going to put monthly subscriptions and make that centered. Now you can see here on the left side, it's not showing that it's money. So I don't like that. I'm going to go ahead and click into this and then change that to currency rounded. I'm going to do the same exact thing for this one over here. Instead of being from data source, we'll say currency rounded. And now we're good. Now we only have one dot here, and that's because there's only one thing listed. But if I were to go to my expense tracker and list something else, so let's say for November 13th, we have a debit for streaming service 1, doesn't matter, and we'll say this month it was $19. So now if we go back to our dashboard, you can see that it decreased from $19 to $10. All right, now we have one more chart left, so let's go ahead and click Insert Chart. This will be a line chart. Click the four little boxes, delete what's there, go over to our worksheet, and now we want the credit card information, so we're going to select where it says transaction date. Go ahead and go farther than you need to go, and we'll put this to the end of the column. and hit OK. Put this as monthly transactions per payment type. And we'll make that centered. And that's it. We have minimal input right here, so that's why it looks a little silly, but not too bad. We'll make this the same size. Once you add more transactions, it will start filling in nicely. But that's everything. So now one pro tip is just to select the background and give it a little bit of a background color. So let's go ahead and put this as like a light yellow. And then I'm going to make it pretty symmetrical. And then we can delete everything else. So I'm going to select all these columns, delete them, and then select all of the rows below, delete those. So now we have a nice little chart. And you can make whatever color schemes you want. Everything is customizable. This is just how you do it. All right, so now we have our dashboard built. We have our projected weekly budget tracker, our bills, our expense tracker, the monthly budget, the spend calendar, and the worksheet. So everything is good to go, and you're ready to use it. And happy tracking.